Welcome to LCS Talks. I'm Berkley Glazer. I'm the principal of Langley Christian Middle School. And at the table with us today, we have Kevin Merchandani, who is our Director of Instruction for K-12. We've got Dave McVitie, who is our Therapeutic Counselor for our middle and high school. And our special guest today is Robbie Rhea, who is the Associate Vice President of Student Life at Trinity Western University. Rob has also been a former chaplain at TWU. And Rob, we're just going to get you to tell us a little bit about the work you do at Trinity.
Good. Thanks so much. Yes, I've worked with university students pretty much my whole career, so I think that's one of the great callings in life, so I love my role there. As working in student life, our goal is to look at the development of students in every dimension of who they are. They continue to change emotionally, academically, intellectually, spiritually, and physically, and all those change elements take on a very, I think, robust and deep and vibrant tone during the university years. So that's why I love being there, and these discussions like we're having today and other ones I think are so important and relevant for both for me and for the students themselves.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Rob. So we're talking today about the role that the cell phone specifically is playing in our formation. Mm-hmm. And as we talk about that, Rob, you've got a little bit of a background academically and the work that you've done with youth and young adults. Mm-hmm. But we're speaking specifically today to a K-12 kind of context and families trying to have those kind of conversations. So what can you tell us about what you've learned about the enormous potential that the cell phone affords in our formation today?
Yeah. Good question. My academic training is in the area of pornography. I wanted to do something that was relevant pastorally, but also academically, and this just seemed to be the most appropriate place for me to put my time and attention. But we all know that all of these areas, technology, our phones, pornography, mental health, are all connected. They don't get their own swim lane, that they are interacting with each other. And this is increasingly true for younger and younger people. As coming out of the pandemic, we were pushed into our screens in so many ways that this is such an important conversation for me as a parent of young adult children, but we still had those same sorts of discussions about when do we let them have a phone, how much. All those sorts of questions are so important.
Mm-hmm. So, Robbie, you were involved with your church a number of weeks back in the Digitology series. Mm-hmm. You spoke a little bit about, I think it was your first sermon on the cell phone you mentioned.
Yeah.
Tell us a little about that and help us to get a little bit of a picture of the key biblical passages that guide our understanding of cell phone usage.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question because technology per se is not mentioned in the Bible, but what is mentioned in the Bible is what it is to live a wise life, and teach us to number our days aright that we may attain a heart of wisdom. Psalm 90 verse 12, I think. So I think that is such a guiding verse for me. How do I lay out my day and my decision making such that I grow in wisdom, so that as technology evolves, because we know if we were to meet back in 10 years, it would be a totally different landscape technologically and so on. So I think for me, to recognize that our cell phones, and this is true for me as well as it is for a young person, I don't assume a lot of moral high ground just because I'm older. I see just as many people my age glued to their phones, not looking at someone as youth. So I want to say that as we take our phones, we pick them up, we handle them, we look at them. The average person checks their phone 75 times. That's the average person, 75 times a day. It is a truism from Christian formation that if you just do something and repeat it enough times, you're formed. It cannot help but form you. So if you take repetitive physical action through pulling your phone out, looking at it, but also throw in a little dopamine hit like, hey, someone responded to me, or if there's sexualized content, that it engages the person on not just a physical level, but a emotional level, a spiritual level. And that's why it is such an important conversation about formation and why it would make sense to talk about it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We'll come back to some conversation here and some discussion about the role of pornography. But in particular, we've been talking about with our guiding principles how to live a life of wisdom. And we've been talking about wisdom as opposed to law. Maybe, and we've got David McVitie here as well too, and we've been walking through our motion coaching framework. What can we learn in terms of the role that the cell phone should play in our families, and what are the challenges that families might be working through as they navigate the role that the cell phone is playing in terms of their family's formation?
Man, something this week that I was reading and thinking through was kind of one of our core needs being to have and know that someone is available to us, right? And we know that's one of the roles that God fills in our lives. But we also have people in our worlds, and especially our kids. If we aren't available, I catch myself saying goodnight to my kid, holding my phone in my hand. I am not available. Yeah. He sees it and he knows it, creates a wall. And so in that simple way, I'm modeling for him what's more important. And in turn, he will follow suit and model that. And so we're creating gods out of our cell phones. We're allowing them to form us, Rob's words there, and we're not focusing on what matters. God, spirituality, getting to know Jesus more, growing in wisdom and relationships with each other. So the whole family's kind of fallen apart if we all just stare at our phones.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned scriptural bases. I think one of the things that a couple that have been so helpful for me is Philippians 4, which is whatever is true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, excellent. If there's anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on those things. To pray that with my children, that's something that I have done when my kids were younger, is just to pray through that with them, and hopefully where they caught that as well. And I think that can help, not just seeing cell phones as stop doing that, but to have a grid for how can I do that in an appropriate and a wise way, to where I know what is true and honorable, right, pure, lovely, excellent. So I think having that as a prayer priority is key for us.
Yeah, these questions I was processing a bit today, and we don't want to make like the cell phone the enemy.
No, that's right.
Right? Like money. The Bible doesn't talk about phones, but it talks about money. It's not inherently evil, but it sure can be used for it, and it can totally turn our hearts from God. And so I was thinking of cell phones in that sense, being good stewards, redeeming, using for good things, and letting God be the focus of that. Are we allowing ourselves to, or intentionally directing ourselves to use our phones and the technology available to us for good and for God's glory?
Yeah, this is really good. Let's get a little practical here. So a couple little scenarios to walk through. Your elementary age child, they come to you and they say they want their first cell phone. What does that conversation look like?
Well, I think that the best thing to do is to say, all right, well, let's talk about that. And not just immediately shut it down right away. And I know with different children, it depends on birth order. You know, what happens with the last child versus the first child can be a different experience, and families have different priorities and commitments. So I would hate to generalize to say every grade 4 this or every grade 5, knowing that there's differences. But I would say an important thing is for them to realize this is a big deal, not to make it, oh, it's just a phone, it's a thing. It's not just a phone or a thing. It will shape that person's world, because so much of friendship is mediated. Relationships are mediated through phones now. If you want to get friendship right, you have to get friendship right through your phone. So helping them be aware of this and realize that it is not just a going from zero to here's your smartphone, that there's a graduated sort of approach that can take, where you can get a phone that has, other than you can dial and maybe do one other thing, but that's it, to sort of move into that realm and not just go from 0 to 100.
Yeah, I actually love your word. For years, I was encouraging families to kind of come up with their own graduated system. And it's going to have to shift a little bit as technology changes, right? Yeah. So it's not rigid in that sense, but if you have a family, here's what we value and here's how we respond to technology, and here's the age that you can start. And when you show yourself not worthy, but faithful with what you're given, we move you to the next step, just like a driver's license, right? And so process through what that would look like and start young. Just like when you're talking to kids about sex, if you wait too long, it's super awkward, and you're in fight mode, or they're just not wanting to hear it. Same with phones.
Yeah.
If you don't have these conversations early and use emotion coaching from previous podcasts just to validate why they'd want one, let them know it makes sense that they're seeing that, it's a desire they have, instead of just dismissing.
And be a good role model yourself. Like you had mentioned that earlier. I think that is something that can be so overlooked, is do as I say, not as I do, but being willing to be a good example of phones away during meals, or those sorts of times that you really turn your face and attention towards that.
And let your kids hold you accountable to that.
Yeah.
Right? Allow them to see it, to notice. It's hard and it's humbling as a parent, but it creates that culture and dynamic where they receive it from you if they're allowed to, hey, Dad, I feel like you're not paying attention to me right now.
Yeah. Sounds like there's a timeliness that needs to take place with not overexposing, but then also recognizing the needs and having conversations in appropriate ways. And so really living into that idea of wisdom over law. Let's dig into that idea of setting up what that graduated kind of system looks like. Might we, for a middle school age student, so again, ages 11 to about ages 13, 14, what might that look like to set up healthy cell phone usage?
And let me jump in first, because being principal in middle school, we of course have to deal with the fallout of misuse. And one of the big things for us is integrity and honesty and not lying. So social media, being legal age, having to be 13 right, plays a big factor for us. And so now I'm going to just let you guys respond to that, knowing that is something we should be truthful about. But then how do we help parents navigate the pressures of, everybody's on TikTok or everybody's on this social media? So Rob or Dave, whoever.
Well, there's two factors to that, right? There's first the device, and then the different social platforms and apps. For me, I've started my kids off with iPods or an iPhone that's not on a plan.
Network, right?
Because they're the easiest to set up parental controls, to shut off the app store, to put time constraints on. Not always easiest to track, but if you're only having those things on, there's not as much to track yet. And things you need to navigate, like kids' messenger, they're having to learn a lot earlier than I'd like how to communicate with each other. But if it's through your messenger, you get updates on who they've talked to, and you get to read all their stuff. So starting there and kind of showing them what the targets are.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to check your phone, and we're going to read through your messages once in a while together, just because this is what we do. Me and Mom do this with each other. Whether you do or don't, you hopefully don't have passwords that keep your spouse from your phone. And modeling that, like you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, that's one of the rules that we had, that the parents always had the passcodes to the phone if we were paying for it, and that was sort of a bit of our leverage, because we paid for their phone, that we made that we didn't look all the time, but we could at any point look for those. So I think talking to other parents, because often, kids, they benchmark so quick. Yeah, but what about so-and-so? They're the pastor's son, for goodness sakes. How come? And I think talking to other parents where you can kind of get on the same page, where there's a little bit of, inertia from a group. I think another thing is having older students, like if you have an older sibling or maybe people at school, speak to someone. Let's say you have a senior in high school speaking to a grade 7 about, okay, here's a great thing about the phone. Here's something you need to be aware of. So I think it's great to call out, juniors and seniors in high school, to see them as investing and helping give wisdom to people that are coming up. I think that's a great dynamic for both parties, I think.
Yeah.
First of all, I've made a lot of mistakes with this. So my oldest is 27, so we've gone through stuff and watched technology change a lot in that time frame. We didn't think anything of MSN Messenger, and that became like, this is my private journal world. No, it's not. And so we had to backtrack on a bunch of stuff. But we have noticed that parents don't usually respond poorly when they're sending their kids over to our house and we say, hey, your kids are going to have to turn their phones off and hand them to us when they get here. They're like celebrating. I didn't even know I was allowed to do that. Don't be afraid to tell these parents that you're going to be extra careful with devices. They're probably going to appreciate it. And if they freak out, that's telling for you whether or not you want your child to sleep there or whatever. Your kind of play dates and sleepovers are like.
So let's chat a little bit about a high school student example. So parents feel like they've lost control of their child and their cell phone usage, and they really want to start that dialogue up again. Child says, "Hey, I need my phone for homework." How do you engage in that conversation and bring that into a space where there's openness and honesty and dialogue about the role the phone's actually playing in their development?
I think you just have to be honest about especially if they've gone too far. You're trying to reclaim ground, like you've said. You realize, okay, this has gotten out of control. I think it will be tough. When I look back to our own parenting, when we had to do those same sorts of things to kind of say, okay, we allowed this, yeah, that has to get walked back. You just have to be willing to stand your ground and to say, this is why I'm doing it. It's not just punitive. It's not just where the phone, that's one thing that youth are especially sensitive to, is the phone becomes the source where all punitive damages are done. If you're going to punish them for anything, it's your phone. You do this, you lose your phone. So I think separating that a little bit and trying to state that for their own well-being, be it to get better sleep, not having their phone next to their bed, or for exposure to different sorts of things, that you want to walk back and have different times that you step away from it, not just a wholesale, but sort of a reasonable response, and get their feedback on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, as much as possible, start young, because if those standards start, charging station in parents' room at night, or at dinner, we don't touch our phones, or whatever standards that you want. Try and think those through sooner than later.
Yeah.
But like you asked, Kevin, if you're stuck a little too late, what I've talked about a lot and often is just appeal to their good graces, let them know why, that you long to be connected with them, that you miss them, but invite them. Like, again, don't make the phone the enemy.
Yeah.
Make the relationship an invitation. Hey, I miss connecting.
Yeah.
I miss hanging out.
Yeah.
I'd like to do this with you. Can we try this?
Yeah.
And if they enter the room, I used to talk about this in some parenting stuff I did with kids who were addicted to video games and stuff. And this one parent came and said, my child came in, I'm cooking dinner, and they sat down at the counter and just started talking. And I kept cooking, and then he left. Oh, okay, drop everything and listen.
Yeah.
Right? If they're here to engage, I don't care what you have to do. Save that dinner for tomorrow, order pizza, do what you need to do to be present when they are there and offering to be present, and enter their world, go to the rooms, do whatever you need to do to woo them back into relationship. Show them what's better than their phone.
That's good.
All right. Rob, your work with research of young adults and this whole area of pornography and spiritual formation.
Yeah.
What have you discovered in that area?
Yeah, one of the things that is true is that the primary way that people access pornography now is through their phone. One of the biggest porn aggregate websites, they track how people access their content, and they posted for 2021, 84% of their content was accessed via a smartphone. So it, without a doubt, is the primary way people now are accessing pornography, and that would certainly be true for young people. So I think if I have one thing for you to remember, is to move the phone away from the bedside. That combination of laying down, being tired, access to a phone can just be a killer combination. It's a killer combination for anybody, but for a young person. And that often it doesn't necessarily start with, I'm going to look at porn, but hey, Instagram, a girl in a bikini or some sort of swim or some sort of this sort of thing. Well, that gets that engine started, and then you just start down the path. So I think the phone and bedside is something you need to give special attention to, because that, with students that I talk to, it is the most common place where they make bad choices. One final thing to say is, if you find that your child confesses to you, or it comes to light that they've been doing this, I implore you to embrace them and say, I'm so sorry. Bring them in. Say, we're going to work on this together, because I can tell you from talking to so many university students that didn't have a good interaction with their parents, where they blew up and said, I can't believe you did that. You told me you lied, or they blamed the other parent. Like, you said you were going to watch this. that will be the last time they share with you. So know that that is an incredibly vulnerable moment when they either share or it becomes aware. Embrace them, bring them in. Hey, that was then, this is now, we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
And it can actually be really hard for some parents not to blame themselves for that.
Yeah.
And you may have some responsibility, but if they're confessing to you, don't make the confession about you.
Yeah.
Don't jump on, oh, I'm so sorry, I should have done more. Just
Yeah.
be present, like Rob's saying, or that'll shut them down differently.
Yeah.
Oh, now you made it about you. Now I don't want to talk to you about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this out there as a little bit of a conversation for us. You think your child's accessing content through their phone that they shouldn't be accessing. How do you navigate that conversation?
Well, first, start young and put filters on there. Be monitoring from very early. That's part of your graduated system, so you can prove and see what's going on. Before you give your child the device, put parental controls on it, and that just becomes the norm. That's a big thing. We've actually intentionally kept an older router in our house because we can use Disney Circle, which is a different way of filtering and monitoring, putting time parameters on, all that kind of stuff. There's other ways to do it, but that's the one we've chosen. So do all that from a younger age. But more to your question.
Yeah, I think if you believe and I would specifically, Covenant Eyes is a great one to use because they give you so much great content that you can access resources for parenting and for spouse, all those sorts of things. So they're great. And they have a particular feature that does screen captures. So it'll just, as someone's on their phone, it'll just capture what's on the screen, bank those, and send them to you, the person. So with us, we said, okay, if you're going to have a phone, you have to have Covenant Eyes on it. There's not a like, hey, we'd really love it if that was just the way it went. Now, creative people can get around this. That needs to be, it's not like problem solved. So I think that is a key. Covenant Eyes is a great one for that screen capture feature. Another one is to just keep asking, hey, how are things going? The best time, particularly with my son, was when he was going to bed and we would go in, the lights were out, he was laying down, and I would pray with him, and I would just say, hey, is there anything you need to tell me? How are things going with your phone? Or when you're in a car, that's another one, because everybody's looking straight ahead. They know that the ride will end at some point, so it's not that awkward. So finding those moments, and they don't talk every time, but it's shots on goal. If you do this enough time, there will be one of those times where they go, I have to talk to you. So it's just being there again and again and again.
Yeah. I love that image of the habits and the patterns that continue to form us, and how our conversations can either interrupt that cycle or continue to encourage and promote a way of formation. So this has been really great to hear from you, Rob, and Dave. We appreciate your insights as well too. But what would you leave us with in terms of encouragement as a Christian learning community? What challenges do you have, and how can we continue to think about the role of technology, living wisely with it in our Christian learning community?
Yeah, I think just as we began, that technology is not the foe in and of itself. It's for most people, social media, it's a good thing. I mean, it connects us with people, and that's a human thing to want to connect. So just realizing that it has its place and space in our lives. So I think one of the verses that is so helpful to me, and when I talk to people dealing with pornography, but to apply it more broadly, is 2 Timothy 2:22, which it says, "Flee your youthful lusts, pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call upon the Lord from a pure heart." So this idea of running from, so looking for things that we need to just let go of, that we just turn our back from and say, no, that's not me. And then flee your youthfulness, pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace. So how can I bring things into my life, things that are true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, excellent? And that cannot just be, it's reading the Bible, prayer, worship, but it's also serving. That is one of the things I've come to realize can be hugely helpful to fill a relational void that porn people can use to attempt to fill, is to stay connected to people and give and serve and live connected. And I think that helps that. So with those who call upon the Lord from a pure heart. So with other people, that bring other parents into this, bring students, bring a friend into this. Maybe it's a youth pastor or a youth worker or just a peer, can be so helpful, because that's the thing. We think we're the only person that this is happening to, and we just shrink into this shell of shame and just can't imagine sharing with someone else. But when you share, that's when that crack happens and light shines in, and you're not the only one. It is a common experience. So being willing to take that step is so great.
Yeah, you're not the only one. You're also not the only parent. Your child, drastically higher percentage that your child has seen some form of pornography.
Yeah, for sure, majority.
No matter how many filters you put in, they don't have to look for it. They'll find it accidentally, and know that you're not alone wrestling with that, and you're not going to be blamed or looked at as a failure if you reach out for help. But Luke 16, we can't serve two masters. And is your use of whatever it is, technology, phones, expanding your circle of community and allowing you to be more of who God's called you to be, or removing from that. And that's kind of what we want for our kids too, I think.
Awesome. I want to thank the panel for engaging us today, and I want to thank you, listeners, for listening to us. Just another encouragement, if you have any questions, you can contact us at podcast@langleychristian.com, and we will be able to answer further questions that you might have. For now, we're signing off. Thank you.